Okay, Bruce, thank you very much. That's all for now, but Brenda Braxton will join us in just a moment for our live coverage of this morning's gubernatorial debate. Democrat Ted Kulongoski, Republican Kevin Mannix, and Libertarian Tom Cox are squaring off at the Portland Hilton. And for the next hour, we will listen in. Join us. Until we see you again, have a great morning.
So sexy, it'll make you want to cheat on your sofa. The Camilla shades from Lazy Boy. The new look of comfort.
Because not everything stays in style. Trade-in days, where your sofa or chair is worth money toward one that's a little more up-to-date. Only at Lazy Boy Furniture Galleries.
They're at it again. Another extreme ballot measure that would create more government bureaucracy, more red tape. Measure 27 is a complex food labeling scheme that would tie up Oregon farmers, grocers, and restaurants in red tape, create more government bureaucracy, and cost Oregon taxpayers and consumers millions of dollars. Measure 27. The more you know about it, the less you'll like it.
This is a Northwest News Channel 8 special, Decision 2002, the governor candidates debate, the Oregon economy.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Brenda Braxton. Thanks for joining us. In just about 1 month, Oregonians will choose someone to replace Governor John Kitzhaber. And this morning, the candidates for governor meet for their first debate. It's part of the Portland Business Journal's Power Breakfast series. We'll broadcast this debate live and uninterrupted until 9 o'clock this morning. The candidates participating this morning are Democrat Ted Kulongoski, Republican Kevin Mannix, and Libertarian Tom Cox. News Channel 8's Vince Patton joins us now from the downtown Hilton, where that debate is about to get underway. Good morning, Vince.
Good morning, Brenda. And the moderators are introducing the candidates as we speak. We should tell you this will be moderated this morning by Judy Pepler, who's with the Portland Business Alliance, and Jim Johnson, a former vice president of Intel. Many of the questions you'll hear this morning will naturally be about business, since that is the crowd these candidates are appearing in front of. And interestingly, in our poll this week that we released just a couple of days ago, most Oregonians polled say they don't know who the best candidate is to fix Oregon's economy. So there will be some key important questions. In fact, as they are beginning, you can see also that the governor's race this week, our poll also shows that Kulongoski leads Kevin Mannix 42 to 36%. But still a very sizable undecided margin out there. 20% of the people don't know yet who they're going to vote for in the governor's race. This is the first joint appearance of the fall. They've had a couple more this summer, but this will last for 1 hour. And let's go to the podium as the debate begins.
Good morning. My name is Tom Cox. I am the Libertarian candidate for governor of Oregon. Like many of you, I'm a parent. I have a mortgage. I work hard and I pay my taxes. I also am part owner of a family business. I'm not a fundamentalist, but I do believe in God. And despite the problems that we face, I am optimistic for my family and for our community. But there are problems, and some of them relate to this very race. During the past year, our children's schools have been repeatedly held hostage through 5 special legislative sessions. Affordable health care is for many moving ever further out of reach. A recession has weakened our economy, saddling Oregon with the nation's highest unemployment. Our corporate employers are in flight. Housing is too expensive, and our roads are congested. At the same time, the PERS retirement system threatens to saddle our children with as much as $20 billion in unfunded liability. Some say we face a spending crisis. Others say we have a funding crisis. I say we face a crisis in leadership. With a few notable exceptions, most of our so-called leaders these past several years haven't led us anywhere. Instead of leaders, we've had caretakers, managers, even some influence peddlers, running the state amidst an air of partisan gridlock. The result has been a total failure to come up with any real plan for sustained prosperity, security, or opportunity. Now, like many of you, I'm frustrated. I sense missed opportunity. In my heart, I know we can do better. And that is why I entered this race. All year long, Oregonians have waited to see detailed budget proposals from my two opponents, outlining their vision for the future of Oregon. We're still waiting. Kevin says he is the fiscal conservative in this race, but that's a myth. As a legislator, he backed and championed billions of dollars in tax increases. Recently, he backed a cigarette tax and the delay of the implementation of Measure 88. Recently, Kevin said he would revisit the double majority law and Measure 5. Kevin refuses to take any stand on the minimum wage. At the same time, Kevin is proposing to give taxpayer money to every constituent group he meets with, apparently believing that we can borrow the money to pay for it. Government on a credit card is irresponsible. It's a bad idea. And frankly, his proposals appear Clinton-esque in light of the fact that he signed a no new taxes pledge. At the same time, Ted Kulongoski is an unabashed tax and spender. Be proud of what you are. He supports the proposed income tax increase we will be voting on in January. I believe that that is unconscionable during a recession. Ted wants a sales tax, rejected by Oregon voters 9 times. During his time as a Supreme Court justice, he voted to throw out Measure 8, a ballot measure supported by the people which would have eased the $20 billion unfunded liability of PERS. Ted may be honest about wanting more taxes, but taxes have never paved the road to prosperity. That's what my opponents represent: borrow and spend, or tax and spend. They offer no real plans, no detail, ultimately no solutions for Oregon. We simply cannot wait any longer for Kevin and Ted to provide leadership. Let me give you what no one else has: a detailed set of plans for solving the problems facing our state. I have released a complete 800-line budget featuring proposed spending levels for every state department and agency. It fully funds education while getting Oregon out of the lottery business and providing a $1.5 billion tax cut. This is a complete budget, not like the vague priority lists released by my opponents. My budget illustrates a vision that acknowledges that we, not the government, create wealth, places faith in the people, in you. My proposals are bold, but timidity is no virtue with the challenges we face. Nobody has all the answers, but I want to solve the problems, and I alone am willing to take the political risks to do so. Please vote for me, Tom Cox, for Governor of Oregon.
Ted Kulongoski is the Democratic candidate for governor. Ted served in the U.S. Marine Corps in the 11th and 12th Marine Regiments as a forward observer with the artillery. With the help of the GI Bill and money earned as a truck driver and steel worker, Ted attended the University of Missouri, where he earned both his undergraduate and law degrees. After moving to Oregon in the early 1970s, Ted founded and was senior partner in a law firm in Eugene. Ted has served at the top levels of each branch of state government, including service as a Supreme Court Justice from '97 to 2001, Attorney General from '93 to '97, and state legislator from 1975 to '83. As insurance commissioner under Governor Neil Goldschmidt in the late 1980s, Ted undertook efforts to reform his department to make it more consumer-friendly and managed a successful effort to reform Oregon's workers' compensation system. Ted also advocated federal help for small businesses with research and development, worked to see antitrust laws strengthened to protect small business from corporate mergers, and called for an easing of tax and regulatory burdens on small business. Additionally, Ted has served on the board of Associated Oregon Industries in 1991 and 92. Ladies and gentlemen, Ted Kulongoski.
I thank the Portland Business Journal for sponsoring this debate. I am running for governor to solve the most pressing issue facing Oregon. Our economic house is not in order. I don't have to go through the numbers. You know them, the citizens of Oregon know them, we're all living them. We need to turn this economy around, to end the political debates, the political battles, to end the doubts about our ability to take control of our own future, and to get back to basic Oregon values of building prosperity by lifting each other up. But this cannot happen without strong, experienced leadership at the top, and that's what I will bring to the office of the governor. I will deliver the right message. We have to grow the economy and provide more living wage jobs. We need to create a business environment that attracts new businesses and encourages existing businesses to grow and prosper. To accomplish these objectives, I will, as the governor, set the right tone. I will reach out to you, the legislature, and the citizens of this state. My governorship will be about open doors, not Democrats and Republicans. It will be about finding the common ground, not dividing the pie. It is about hope and about the future, not recriminations about the past. I am someone who enjoys diverse opinions. People will know that when they come into my office that they will be able to say, Governor, that's the worst idea I've ever heard. I might not agree, but I'll listen. And I will bring many voices into the room to try to resolve the problem and see that it gets an open and a fair hearing. Albert Einstein said, keep things as simple as possible, but not simpler. That's what I intend to do. My agenda is simple. As I said before, I have two missions for the next 4 years: grow the economic pie and create more living wage jobs. That's it. Because if we, together, accomplish those two goals, everything else will fall in place. We will have the money we need to provide the stable funding for K-12 education. We will be able to strengthen the higher education and make the investments in the infrastructure for higher education to turn Oregon into the most successful state for high technology. We'll extend Oregon's economic opportunities to every region of this state so that rural Oregon does as well as urban Oregon, and small and medium-sized businesses do as well as large businesses. We'll be able to fix PERS and have a retirement system that is sustainable and affordable as well as fair and adequate. We'll open new opportunities for minority and women-owned businesses. We'll get control of health care costs, which have become a growing burden on businesses and a barrier to economic growth. Equally important will be the lifting of the regulatory burden on small businesses. I recently told the magazine Oregon Business there should be performance measurements on administrative rules. People in government should be required to meet time requirements and eliminate redundancy. And when this is done, government will have reestablished its credibility with its citizens. Finally, we will face the future with hope and certainty and a renewed belief in our ability to take charge of our own destiny, and that there is nothing in this state that we cannot accomplish as Oregonians. I can't do this alone, but I can pull other people together who think that they cannot do anything with the economy, and I can lead them to solve Oregon's economic problems. This is not about campaign rhetoric. I've done it. I have a record. I reached out to business and labor and solved Oregon's workers' compensation crisis. And I reached out to the police, the courts, and the child advocates and solve the juvenile justice problem here in Oregon. I will do the same for the economy. I am certain of it, and I believe that there are others in Oregon who believe the way I do. I've already received the support of Oregon's only Fortune 500 company, Nike, and the Oregon Business Journal's Entrepreneur of the Year, Jim Kelly of Rejuvenation. In other words, from the largest Oregon companies to the smallest, the most successful business leaders have looked at my record, know my commitment, and trust my ability to get this job done. I won't let them down, and I will not let you down. I share the values of the people of Oregon. I can and will pull people together, and together we will pull Oregon out of this economic recession and into a future of prosperity, creation of new jobs, and more growth. Thank you very, very much.
Kevin Mannix is the Republican candidate for governor. After 8 years of government service, during which time Kevin served as the Assistant Attorney General as well as administrative law judge, Kevin joined the Portland law firm of Lindsay, Hart, Neal, and Weigler, thank you.
Jerry Weigler thanks you.
I appreciate the correction. He was an associate for 3 years, largely handling insurance litigation. He then became the House counsel to the firm for 2 years while he opened his own law firm in Salem. Since January of '86, Mannix has owned his own Salem law firm representing businesses in administrative law, personal matters, and insurance matters, including the defense of worker compensation claims. During his 5 terms as a state representative, he was best known for his public service measures, but he was also authored major business reform legislation, notably the law which established the magistrate division of the Oregon Tax Court, and many laws reforming the workers' compensation system and other aspects of tax law. During his service as a legislator, Mannix was on the Judicial, Labor, and Rules, as well as Ways and Means committees, which involved him in the complete range of business and economic issues. He served 2 interim terms on the Emergency Board. Ladies and gentlemen, Kevin Mannix.
"28 years ago, a young lawyer took his law degree at the University of Virginia, and with his bride, who had just taken her Bachelor of Science in Nursing from the University of Virginia, honeymooned on the way west to Oregon. We had adopted Oregon as our home state because we were Foreign Service kids, didn't really have a home state, and that was really Susanna's suggestion, that we choose a state where we most wanted to live together, pursue our careers, raise a family, make a home. We came to Oregon in June of 1974, and we've been adoptive Oregonians ever since. I've been blessed since then, not only with a wonderful marriage of 28 years and 3 fine youngsters, 1 20 in college and 2 in high school, but also with an opportunity to share a life with Susanna in which she has pursued her career in nursing, and reminds me every day, by the way, of the challenges facing medical care practitioners and nurses in our society. She is today the nurse manager of the intensive care unit and the coronary care unit at Salem Hospital. And she knows what issues confront real people because she deals with those real people every day. During this time, we shared a couple of years of adventure abroad, doing a little overseas mission. I was an assistant attorney general for the U.S. territory of Guam, while Susanna served as a civilian nurse for the United States Navy. This was all BC, as we like to say, before children. It gave us an opportunity to serve our nation in another place, but it also gave us an opportunity to understand why we had only rented our house in Salem and why we wanted to come back. It reaffirmed our belief in Oregon as a land of opportunity, a great place with geographic beauty, with wonderful people, and with a governmental system that really believes that people are in control, that we own the government doesn't own us. The Oregon Plan of 100 years ago, the initiative, the referendum, the recall, warts and all, it's a system where we say to the people, you're in charge. So we've enjoyed the blessings of prosperity, career, family, and I've enjoyed the opportunity to share some of my talents in public service. But during this past year, as a former legislator who used to enjoy the legislative process and participate in positive decision-making, I've watched in dismay as we've gone through 5 legislative sessions, special sessions, not so special, I would say, where the wrangling wasn't over how do we improve our economy, how do we redirect government, but simply how do we refashion the state budget. Well, the state budget crunch is just a microcosm of what's going on in the state. If state income is down $1 billion, that means income for the people is down $25 billion. And what does that mean? It's not just unemployment rates, it's the working mom who's lost her job. It's the dad in the middle of his career who's been given a pay cut just as his son is about to go off to college. It's real people suffering in a state of opportunity with nature's bounty around us. And yes, great people with great human resources. How do we get there? How did we get there? We got there through a lack of positive leadership, a no-can-do mentality, a state government focusing on itself rather than her own people. As I describe it in some of my speeches, we've been in a bit of a funk. But I remember that Oregonians have got spunk and grit and capability. And we can change things in this state. We can change things for the better by understanding that we should not have one of the most heavily regulated states in the United States under state government rules and administrative rules. And a governor can change that almost overnight by directing administrators to use common sense and rely on the statutes and to stop hiding behind rules that businesses have to bring lawyers in to try to understand. That we can reduce the economic burden for those who would invest in this state by reducing the capital gains tax, the second highest in the nation, a disincentive for venture capitalists to come here. Send a signal in January. Let's reduce that capital gains tax for those who will invest in Oregon beginning in January so we can get this economy going again. And yes, let's re-engineer government to make it work better. Because I think, too, of the parents who are looking at the shortest school year in Oregon's history, the shortest school year in the nation, or other parents who are contemplating a higher education system that just got failing grades. Or worse yet, the parents of that child who goes to school hungry every day. And we hear arguments over the statistics. Are we the worst in the nation for hunger? Does that matter when there's one child who goes to school hungry? We have failed as a society to understand that the short-term answer, of course, is compassion for that child. Feed that child. But the long-term answer is to change this economy, get it going again, so that that child's parents will have a job and we'll all have opportunities again as Oregonians. This campaign is about fresh thinking and reform and getting Oregon going again, because it's not about government, it's not about me, it's about all of us and our future. Thank you.
We'll begin the moderated question portion now. We did do a random drawing, as we said, and Kevin, you were selected as the first candidate to take the initial question. You can pick a number between 1 and 6.
I'll take door number 5.
Door number 5, all right. What changes, if any, will you attempt to make to our current land use regulations, and how will you go about implementing them?
The major change that we need in land use regulation is simplify and reduce the appeals process. Right now, a naysayer, a single naysayer, can file an appeal and delay a project for up to 2 years, sometimes longer. Tie it up in litigation. Eliminate that pending business opportunity. That is, we allow the naysayers and the no-can-do folks to use lawyers and technicians, and forgive me, fellow lawyers and technicians, to hold up the process. And holding up the process often means the process dies. And why does it die? Because the opportunity passes. And why does it pass? Because that investor will choose to go somewhere else. That investor will go to another state where the opportunity is more immediate, because people can't wait 2 years to see whether or not they can usefully use their property. So the first challenge is to have folks in charge of this process who understand that problem, and beyond that, to have a process where any appeal, any challenge of a community decision in favor of using land should only be based on an absolute violation of the state statutes, which does not often occur. These technical violations of these so-called rules, which are a forest of rules that even lawyers cannot understand, provide too much opportunity for the naysayers to tie up our property, our community, our lands, our opportunities for economic growth. Our entrepreneurs can't afford it, and that means we lose jobs, and that means folks don't have the opportunities to take care of their families. And we need to understand that is the endemic problem with land use, not the idea of communities coming together to make decisions about what they want to do with their land, but the idea that a very small percentage of folks in those communities can prevent the communities from making good use of those lands. That's the kind of change that we have to have.
Thank you, Kevin. For rebuttal, Tom, you go first.
Thank you. We have, for a long time, rested on our laurels in the Portland area and as a state on the good intentions behind our land use planning laws. And we have not allowed ourselves to ask some tough questions. What are the unintended consequences of the land use planning process as it currently exists today? You may know we have a poverty rate that is 18% higher than average. And that's not just because our economy is troubled. It's not just because incomes have been hit by the recession. Poverty is measured by comparing income to the cost of food, clothing, and housing. And housing is too expensive. And the cause of that, I'm afraid, is one of the unexpected, unintended consequences of the land use planning process. We have got to revisit the reality of land use planning and not simply say it's well-intentioned, therefore it's good. That is never enough.
Ted.
I believe that our environment, which includes our land use planning system, is this state's strongest economic asset. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't sit down and look and see if, in fact, that asset is being managed properly. The concerns that I have about the land use system right now are about three things. One, the industrial lands issue. I think we need to sit down and determine whether, in fact, there is a shortage of industrial lands and make a decision of what we want to do to see that we have an adequate supply of industrial land. That is part of what I believe my idea of economic growth is about. The other things that I think that we need to look at is looking at a system in which it's more not a cookie-cutter approach, but I actually believe there's merit to the sub-regional analysis, and I think that we should look more closely at that. And I'm also willing to look again at the soil composition issue, because I think that, in fact, that the growth and the population and the jobs are in certain areas, and I think we need enough flexibility in the system to accommodate that growth and that industrial production in that particular area. I think that ultimately, I think that what we're going to have to do is to sit down, understand how important this program is to us as a people, but understand we have to look at the state, one, as a regional basis, and the second issue is I think we need enough flexibility after 30 years to look to see about the values and the principles in this program and understand how important it is to our economic prosperity.
Kevin, just one quick follow-up. Today, the high-tech sector is the largest economic engine in the state. We have turned away large companies who have come to us who said, we want to move to Oregon, but we want to be on the west side. We told them, no, 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 you want to be on the east side. And they said, that's fine, we'll go to East Colorado. How are we going to change our value structure that's today in law says we value a strawberry farm more than we would a $2 billion fab facility?
Well, Jim, I wouldn't put it down as a choice between a strawberry farm and a $2 million fab facility. Instead, it's a choice about the future of the state. And when I talk to farmers, I say we need to be both urban centrist and rural centrist in understanding land use planning. I want to respect the rights of property owners who've invested in their own property to be able to feel they have a future with that property. At the same time, I want to respect the rights of communities to have a future economically. And the way you can often resolve this is if you pull a community together and you have a special demand for a major project, we should get back away from this one-size-fits-all mentality that the state has and say, well, let's come up with a specialized solution for this community, for this major project, and let's pass special legislation to implement it. The only time the state does it right now is for negative reasons. Well, let's shove a prison in a community that doesn't want it. We'll pass legislation that says it will happen despite land use laws. That's a negative thing to do, especially when other communities want those prisons. And I promise you, I'm not going to shove government projects into communities that don't want them. But what I will do as governor is ask the legislature to work with business communities and local communities and farmers and everyone else. And when we have an entrepreneurial potential, that we pull together legislation to authorize it and say, sure, you get one appeal straight to the Supreme Court to challenge the constitutionality of this measure, but this is a good project, the community wants it, let's go forward. That's the kind of approach I want to see.
Thank you. Ted, you were selected as the second. You get to choose between, two. Very good. What specifically would you change about Oregon's current business tax structure?
Tom, do you want to answer this for me? I will. If I could, in the spring of the year, when we were facing the second special session, I had actually made a recommendation at that time that, in fact, I thought that the legislature should have a straight up and down vote for that second special session on an income tax surcharge at that time. And I said also at that time, I thought that they should look at the capital gains tax as it relates to investments, long-term investments made here in Oregon, and finding an exemption, and whether, in fact, that would be good for developing investment here in Oregon. I still believe that today. There's one other thing that I want to talk to you about is I actually went up and talked to Ralph Shaw, and I had a conversation with him about a program that I had about trying to provide endowments, an endowment fund for the funding of scholarships and loans and grants to the students in our university system. And one of the things that I was looking at is looking for the seed capital to be able to build the endowment. And I am willing to look at the capital gains tax as a funding source at a level initially, instead of putting it directly into the general fund, but as a source to provide the seed capital for this endowment fund for scholarships and loans. I think it would be a very, very good investment of the capital gains tax in Oregon to actually invest it in higher education, which ultimately I think will be a business investment in this state. In the longer term, I think that when we look at the tax code, we all have to understand that the linchpin of this debate is going to be the K-12 system of providing a more permanent and stable funding source for K-12 education. I have said when that debate comes, it will not come from the legislature. I think there are things that we have to do. You have to put accountability into the system of where the money is going now into the school system and into government. I think the public wants to know where the tax dollars are being spent. I think we in government have an obligation to provide that to them. I've also said that, in fact, I think we have to make out a greater need for more investment in K-12. I don't think we've done a very good job of explaining why children today aren't the same as you and I when we went to school, because many of these children have a lifetime of experiences that you and I have never had at 5 years of age. It's about violence and drugs and alcohol. There's never been a book in the house. No one's ever read a book to them, and we lead the citizens to believe that they can walk into the classroom, this child, and somehow this teacher in this learning environment can teach that child to learn and to actually have opportunity at a very cheap cost, and it can't be done. There are schools in the Portland area where there's 20 different languages spoken. So my point to you is I think we need a discussion with the public about education. It will be the linchpin to looking at the issue of the funding source for that particular program. I believe in local control of our schools. I think that's going to be the driving force, is trying to provide a funding mechanism that returns accountability between the school district and the citizens in their community.
Kevin, you're up.
Well, do I get to respond to the education question or to the tax question? On the tax side of things, there is a divergence of opinion up here. Ted supports the income tax increase that's on the ballot in January, and I oppose it. I wrote a piece for the Oregonian last Sunday where I demonstrated that without borrowing, we are able to take care of the state's needs without hurting public safety and without hurting education. But we need to take a collaborative approach. We need to work with the legislature, not against it, and I intend to do that in January. So we won't need to pass that income tax increase piece. We will keep our kids in schools. We will not lay off teachers, but we will also make some other changes in state government. But that's another speech because you didn't ask me about those changes. But one example, by simply using the current mortality tables, the life expectancy tables for PERS, beginning in January, we can save $60 million, $10 million a month in this biennium alone. Those are the kinds of structural changes that need to be brought about to save taxpayers' dollars and use them more effectively for education. But as to the tax structure, I want to see an armistice as to the constant attempt to redesign the tax structure. Redesign in terms of structure. Leave the structure alone for a while, and at the same time, hold the line on taxes. And yes, I said I would impose any legislatively imposed tax increases because we need that tax piece if we're going to encourage investors to come into this state. And they'll know that taxes will not be passed over my signature. The only taxes that would be appropriate would be dynamic tax changes that you can take to the voters and sell them on. At the same time, in January, I will introduce a special bill with an emergency clause to immediately, and I'll be specific about this, reduce the capital gains tax from 9% maximum rate to 5% to get us down in the middle range of the states. And that bill will include a clause that says if you reinvest those gains within a certain time, you can defer the tax. That's one way we'll start bringing venture capital back into Oregon.
Tom?
John, pardon me, I've been listening for so long. John F. Kennedy was the last Democrat I ever heard say that to raise tax revenue, you have to lower the tax rate. He may be the last Democrat to believe that, but it's true. We have got to get our state spending under control, and I've done that in my proposed budget, and that is how I'm going to pay for the tax cut that I've proposed. And that needs to be a tax cut for individuals, for businesses, and I would like to see us eliminate the highly volatile capital gains tax. It is a disincentive for productive investment. It is a complete mistake, and it's unjustifiable. Are we allowed to talk about education in all of our answers? People talk about stable funding for schools, and I think that's just a code phrase for let's have a sales tax. I think we all know what that would do for business. Instead of insisting that education requires us to have new taxes, we should fund the kids first. And my education reform does that. The first dollars going into Salem would have to go to education and public safety. And then when the legislature overspends and comes crying to us for more money, they'll be telling us how they're going to have to privatize the motor pool. Oh, horror. And won't you please, please raise your own taxes? I don't think that'll fly. And I look forward to that.
To keep your vocal cords going, Tom, just to follow up on that, you said that you are going to cut state spending, something that in 5 legislative sessions the legislators have found difficult to do. What specifically are you targeting for cuts?
There are a number of things we can do in the short term that will be very productive. We have some 3,500 approved headcount jobs already in the state budget for which no one's been hired. These are empty positions. And $200 million has been allocated for those positions, and it's not going out the door because there's nobody in those positions. If we eliminated the headcount, we would have $200 million freed up immediately. For instance, the motor pool's another. I have a list of them on my website. And that is the detailed package that I gave to the legislature in June when I called for a $1.7 billion rollback in state spending so that we could protect education instead of cutting it $50 million like we did in the 5th special session, along with the income tax increase that Kevin Mannix supported. Does that answer your question?
Thank you. It is your turn for the initial question. You can pick one.
Number one, please.
Number one. All right. There's been a great deal of discussion on the issue of business recruitment to Oregon, but what steps will you take as governor to help grow jobs in businesses that already do business here, particularly businesses with 1 to 20 million in revenue?
I think most of us in this room already understand that small business is the engine that drives the creation of jobs, and that every successful large business starts as a small business. If Nike had been treated like the startups of today are treated, would it even be in business? And if it were, would it be in Oregon? We have used this idea of recruitment of large businesses into the state as a way for politicians to grandstand, generate headlines for themselves, and how is that recruitment paid for? By shifting the tax burden from the newcomer on to you. And that is wrong. That is special treatment. That is favoritism. And that is not the way government should work. Government should create an environment in which job creation is easy, in which opening a business is as easy as it is in Hong Kong, where you fill out a single form. And nobody guarantees your success, but nobody's kneecapping you either. Ultimately, if we make the reforms I've suggested, if we improve the things that need improving, and we hang on to the many things that are so wonderful about our state, we have to put up a fence to keep them out, because they'll all want to come here. That's how you recruit businesses and jobs into Oregon, and that's how you grow the ones that are here. You give them equal treatment before the law, a flat tax structure, and no favoritism.
Ted, you'll have a rebuttal first.
First of all, I think that when we look at our existing business community and we're trying to provide a business environment for them that they can grow and prosper in, I think that the first thing we have to recognize is that the governor of the state, as the leader, sets the tone. It's the message to the business community, not only within this state, but without Oregon, that says, in fact, that this state is interested in economic development, that, in fact, growing the economic pie is a major part of who we are and what we want to accomplish. To be able to do that, I think everyone in this room knows that if you do business in Oregon with some level of government, you do business with Oregon. And I think that what we have to do is to look at that relationship and see how we can foster a better business environment with the smaller business community so that they can provide those new jobs that we're looking for. I said earlier to you, I think it is around the regulatory process. I believe that there should be performance measurements on administrative rules to see what works and doesn't work. I think we should eliminate redundancy. I also think that the state agencies should be able to develop strategic plans, that who you deal with, a strategic plan that actually says where they're at, where they're going, how they're going to get there, and a performance measurement to see if, in fact, it has actually been achieved. We shouldn't be afraid to put it on the internet and let the public look at it and see if we're doing what we say we're doing. I think that ultimately the governor is the person in this state that can set this tone that will actually tell the business community in Oregon, we're here to see if we can be more service-oriented to you, and we want you to grow the jobs that we're looking for.
Kevin?
I'm going to do less telling and a lot more asking. I'm going to ask every business in the state to send us on a postcard their top 3 lousy rules that they want to see eliminated. That's the first. I also may ask them to send me a confidential postcard that says these are the top 3 lousy administrators I'd like to see eliminated. We will ask all administrators to submit, those who are subject to appointment by the governor, to submit a short statement of what they've accomplished, a short statement of what they hope to accomplish, and a tendered proposed letter of resignation. I will make it clear that they will not all be accepted, but I will also make it clear that we will carefully consider every position in government for reissuance, so to speak, bringing in executives who are retired who understand the private sector, bringing in executives who will take leave from the private sector for short terms to give us advice about how to redesign our agencies. And I'm not interested in strategic planning. The problem is now. The problem isn't 5 years from now. I want the agencies to understand that every single one of them has to immediately reread their mission statement. And if it doesn't say our mission includes economic development, then they better rewrite it right away and include that. Every agency's job is economic development, not just economic development department. Beyond that, I want administrators to understand that they better be listening to the people they deal with. And I'll have little simple whimsical rules such as, with this form that you require everybody to file with your agency, I want you to show me that at least 2 human beings have actually read the form. Things like that. Has it been read, or has it been shoved into the electronic file or the paper file after some business had to spend 2 hours filling out the darn thing? Change the attitude. Are you using this information, or are you storing it? Oversight doesn't mean simply making people file forms. It means getting out there, listening to them, helping them, and sometimes just getting out of the way.
Just a quick follow-up for you, Ted. Tax increment financing has been used by local municipalities to help existing businesses or attract new businesses, and it's been under attack recently or in recent legislative sessions. If a bill came to your desk to try to abolish TIF dollars, what would you do?
No.
Thank you.
That might be a record for an answer.
Don't knock it.
Kevin, you get to pick 3, 4, or 6.
I'll take 3, thank you.
Go. By some accounts, PERS is a $6 to $8 to $12 to $17 to $20 billion liability. How will you resolve this issue for the long term?
It definitely is a liability, and I know Ted in January said that PERS was so great that the private sector ought to emulate it. I do concede that in July he began to realize that we have to take a hard look at it, see about changing it. But some of us, and starting with Ron Saxton in his speeches publicly, have insisted that PERS must be reformed, and it must be reformed now, not later. That means in the next regular session. Here are the problems. Well, I'm not going to tell you the problems with PERS considering the time limitations. You know that the problem essentially is that it's fiscally irresponsible, that it promises a return on investment that nobody could get in the private sector, that it also promises retirement levels that nobody could expect in the private sector. We know those problems. The other problem is taxpayers have to pay for it, and it's not today's taxpayers alone. You heard about the unfunded liability. Whether it's $6 billion or $20 billion, that's a lot of money, and it's our kids and our grandkids who will face that burden unless we act now. I'm tripping up here. Act now to redefine the program. Now, we have to be fair about promises made and contracts entered into. Understand that. But that does not mean that we have to be foolish about the future. We can redefine where we're going to go with PERS and get it back to a fiscally responsible system, which we had up until about 10 years ago. We do need to take care of retirement for our public employees, and it needs to be fair. But at the same time, we're going to have to shift to a system where what we pay in today for public employee services, including their retirement contribution, is all that we pay, and that there is not a promise to pay more later on. That's going to require incentives to get some of the current employees to shift off of the current program. And I know about the legal limitations, which time will not permit me to go into, but the lawyers in the room know what I'm talking about. They've seen the court decisions. We can't screw up on that side either, because 5 years from now, we'll see the litigation, we'll see the penalties and the interest and everything else. We don't want to do that. But we have to be committed to comprehensive reform. The process must begin on the first day of my administration, and it must be finished by the last day of that first session. And if it is not, I'll ask the legislature to come back in special session with a special plan. We cannot let this problem go away, because it will haunt our children and our grandchildren, and I am committed to comprehensive, intelligent reform right away.
Ted, you're first up.
You know, one of the first things that I want to say is that this is a very serious problem for the state, and I commit to you it will be resolved this next legislative session. I will do it the same way that I did the workers' comp system. I will bring in the parties. We will sit down. We will work this out, because it's not only a fiscal issue, it's a credibility issue with the state and the people of Oregon. I sent the governor a letter on about September the 15th that laid out about 7 or 8 different proposals that I thought that the legislature and the governor should be looking at with his task force. One of them was the mortality table issue, and I thought that they should immediately implement a mortality table that's reflective of the current statistics. The second thing is that I said I thought the PERS board should have independent outside counsel so that they could give them advice, not from the government, but from the private sector, and talk about this unilateral contract issue. This issue is going to be resolved. But one of the things I want to tell you is that, you know, when we run, we can say one thing and do another. And what I've never understood, Kevin, is just where you're at on this issue, because you criticized Ron Saxon in the primary with a television ad that was actually critical of him for even bringing the issue up. And the second thing is that I think you have to look at us when we had the opportunity to do something about it. In 1975, when they brought the legislature into the PERS system, I voted against it. I didn't like it. And in 1995, when Measure 8 passed, I defended the right of the people to change the system. Kevin, you had the opportunity in 1999 with a comprehensive PERS reform bill in Senate Bill 722, and when you were in the legislature, you voted against it. You should actually tell us, what do you want to do to resolve this problem?
Tom?
Some of my friends in other states wonder how it is we got in such a deep hole with PERS. Why do they have 3 different funding formulas? Why is it so incredibly complicated? And why is it that if the market goes down or up, the PERS liability gets worse? I tell them that's a really good question. I think one of the fundamental flaws was letting the legislature be PERS beneficiaries. Followed hard on its heels by having judges be PERS beneficiaries.
1 out of 2 isn't bad.
And while I think judges and public employees deserve the same thing we all want, a comfortable, reasonable retirement, I don't think legislators should get a retirement at taxpayer expense. The thing we need to do with PERS is get the legislature off of it, get the judges off of it, and then cash the system out. It has an enormous amount of assets in it. We should cash the system out and roll those assets over into 401k style accounts that will be the private property of the workers. Future contributions will go into that account and be untouchable by the legislature. That will protect the workers, and it will wipe out the liability facing our children and our grandchildren.
Ted, I'd just like to follow up on that question. The sense of urgency, certainly in the business community, is quite extensive, and we've certainly heard a lot of talk among all parties during this campaign. Do you have a specific timeline that you feel you can solve this problem that's been trying to solve for the last 20 years?
The legislature will not go home without resolving this in this next session.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ted, you get the first question this time. 4 or 6?
4.
Will higher education and university research be a top priority for your administration? And if so, what specifically will you do to foster that development?
The answer to it is yes, because if there's any one thing that I think we can do to actually inhibit and actually prevent economic prosperity in this state is to underfund and undersupport our educational system, whether it's the K through 12, community colleges, or the higher education system. The dilemma of why I spun the question to the K through 12 issue, because it's directly related to the state's ability, as the way it's currently structured, to provide the resources for higher education. The truth of it is we're not doing a very, very good job of it. Now, the State Board of Higher Education and the Chancellor's Office is a system that actually was created in about 1922, in which they have basically both fiscal and administrative control over the 7 regional campuses. The truth is they need to be freed up a little. They need to have both fiscal and administrative flexibility. Now, they're trying to move in that direction because I think that's going to allow them, and I hope the new chancellor understands that the role of the State Board and the Chancellor's Office is to help these individual campuses partner up with the business community to see if we can develop relationships which actually brings more financial stability to those institutions. I am willing to let them do that. With this caveat, I still believe that the public purpose behind our state education system is to provide opportunity for the children of this state to attend those universities. This issue of tuition, of how much debt that they're coming out with at the end, is a critical issue. I think we're giving a lot of these kids a ball and a chain when they graduate because they're so in debt. I think that if we're going to free up this structure to give them more flexibility to be entrepreneurial, they have to have a commitment with us, one, to grow my endowment fund idea that will provide scholarships for the best and the brightest students in the state to stay here, because we will pay their tuition. And the second is we have to see that, in fact, that there's a funding mechanism for those students that aren't up at that top tier, but in fact that they perform, or they're the bulk of the children going to school in the state. A lot of them will be on Pell Grants. We need to get the universities, if they're going to be freed up to have this relationship with the business community, to see that each of the campuses provide a student loan, a student scholarship, a student grant program to see that these kids have opportunity. It will do us no good to develop the best higher education system in this state, and it's foreclosed by the students in this state from attending because it's priced out of their control. I, as the governor, will not let that happen. I want them to grow and expand so that not only they can get the investment from the state, but they can get the investment in a partnership with the business community. But I'm absolutely committed to seeing that these students have an opportunity to go to school, and when they get out, that they do not have this ball and chain of debt all around them. I think we can do this. We're going to need your help to partner up with them, because I think this is the future of Oregon.
Tom, rebuttal.
You're going to have to remind me what the question was.
Will higher education and university research be a top priority for your administration? And if so, what specifically will you do to foster that development?
It's traditional for all politicians to say that whatever subject is brought up is their top priority. You will forgive me if I don't follow suit. In my detailed budget, I call for the privatization of all of the state-owned colleges and universities, and to take all the money we're spending now, every penny of it, and direct it into scholarships to go to the children of this state, to allow them to pay whatever it is these newly privatized schools will need to charge them. Now, how much money will that free up for those scholarships? It amounts to over $25,000 per student per year. The tuition at Stanford is $24,400. Tuition at Rice is $16,000. So, ladies and gentlemen, my fellow taxpayers, you're paying for Stanford level quality. Are you getting it? If we privatize the system as I describe, it will free up the colleges and universities to do whatever they want, to attract students, to collaborate with businesses, and so forth. And the scholarship program will empower our children with no net increase in spending to go anywhere in the United States and get the best education possible. That is what the system should be designed around, is giving our kids the best education possible.
This being a televised debate, I think I would be remiss if I didn't correct a couple of comments made on the television record. Tom, the judges are not covered by PERS. They have a separate retirement system. I know it's a good laugh line, but the judges are not covered by PERS. And I disagree with their decisions, but they're not covered by PERS. And by the way, Ted, Ron Saxton ads about PERS. No. That was Jack Roberts that ran those ads. I didn't attack Ron Saxton on this topic. In any event, let's get back to higher education. Let's get back to higher education. It's tough when you're talking about priorities. Tom mentioned the idea, well, gee, everybody's top priority depending on the audience. Well, in reality, there are segments of top priorities. Education and public safety are the two components of what government is all about. And try telling the taxpayers of the state that we intend to sell off the state system of higher education. I think the brief answer is no. So we can move on from there, politics being the art of the possible, and talk about what's possible about higher education for this state. What is possible is to move us up on the grades that you just read about in the media, about the poor grades that we've received. We have plans in place that the legislature approved. I know. I was on the Education 2010 committee that devised a plan for how higher education would be integrated with the business community.
And you've been watching the candidates for Oregon Governor live this morning from the Portland Hilton debate the issues as they have to do with business and the economy. If you'd like to see continuing coverage of this debate, log on to KGW.com. And we will have a full wrap-up today on News Channel 8 at noon. I'm Brenda Braxton. Thanks for joining us.